Have you ever noticed how many African babies seem, well, unusually calm? I want you to really picture this because we see it all the time. You will see a mother in a busy, incredibly noisy open-air market. She is doing intense physical work, she is haggling, she is talking loudly, she's laughing with her friends, and right there, strapped securely on her back, is a baby who is completely passed out, just fast asleep. There is no screaming, there's no fussing, there's just this total peaceful bliss amidst all that chaos. Growing up, we just saw this constantly, so we naturally think it is just normal. It is just how babies are. But what if it is not just a coincidence? What if this phenomenon is actually deeply rooted in nervous system science and human biology? There might just be a profound, hidden emotional wisdom inside traditional African parenting that modern society has somehow completely overlooked in our rush toward convenience. And by the end of this video, you are going to see exactly why the way we modernly carry babies and isolate babies in the West might actually be contributing to why they seem to cry so much. But to truly understand this big secret, I have to tell you a very interesting story about my friend Aminat. So last Tuesday, I was on the phone with Aminat. She lives out in a suburb in Ohio, right? You know, one of those quiet, very picturesque, typical American neighborhoods. And anyway, it was her day off and her house sounded like pure, beautiful chaos. I could hear it all over the phone. She was right in the middle of trying to make dinner. I could hear the pots and pans clinking. Her older child was just getting off the school bus and walking through the front door. And her youngest baby girl was just crying in the background. You know that loud, demanding cry when a baby wants attention right now. But here's the fascinating part. Amina did not sound stressed at all. She sounded absolutely in charge, completely unbothered, like this was just a very little matter that she could handle with her eyes closed. She just casually sighed, not out of exhaustion, but just out of practicality and said, please hold on a second. Let me just put this girl on my back. And I just started laughing so hard. I asked her, wait, at your house right now, out there in Ohio, don't your American neighbors laugh at you? Because I remember clearly when my own children were younger and I would strap them to my back to get things done around the house or in the yard, my neighbors would stare. They would sometimes jest or just look completely puzzled, giving me this look like, what in the world is she doing to that poor child? And Amina just laughed back at me. I said, oh, they absolutely do laugh. But you know what? This is a cultural thing we inherited from our parents. It's just what works. Putting her on my back is just the absolute fastest and easiest way to stop the crying so I can go get my other child settled. It's just the reality of the situation. And you know, that conversation really hit me deeply because she's entirely right. It does stop the crying faster than a mechanical swing, faster than a vibrating bouncer, faster than laying them down in a high-tech crib. But why? Why does a simple piece of cloth and a mother's back act like an almost magic off switch for a crying baby? Well, I decided to do some deep, thorough research into this, and what I found completely blew my mind. If you have ever felt that little tug on your heart when you see a mother carrying her baby the traditional way, or you feel like modern parenting has lost a bit of its soul, please hit that like button right now. It helps us bring this wisdom to more mothers who might be feeling a bit overwhelmed and alone today. Now, this isn't magic at all, it's biology. And the first reason African babies are so calm is something that is absolutely fascinating. It has to do with a biological synchronization that seems to help literally regulate the baby's developing brain. I want you to really think about it. In many African cultures, babies spend hours and hours physically attached to their mother's body. They are not just sitting there passively in a container. They are actively experiencing life through her physical form. When a baby is pressed firmly against their mother's back, they are constantly hearing her heartbeat, a sound they listen to for 9 months in the womb. They feel the exact rhythmic rise and fall of her breathing, and they feel the deep, comforting vibrations of her vocal cords resonating through her chest and back every single time she talks, laughs, or sings. Through all of this continuous contact, their young nervous system is constantly learning safety. You see, modern science tells us a lot about something called the vestibular system, which is the sensory system located in the inner ear that controls our sense of balance, spatial orientation, and movement. When an African mother is walking, sweeping the floor, cooking, or just naturally swaying as she talks, she is providing constant, gentle, rhythmic motion to her baby. And researchers suggest that this specific type of continuous motion naturally regulates the baby's vestibular system, which in turn might help keep their cortisol levels, which is the body's primary stress hormone, incredibly low. Imagine being a tiny infant. The world is bright, loud, and overwhelming, but you are wrapped tightly in a warm fabric, rocking to the exact biological rhythm of the person who gave you life. It makes perfect sense why they would fall asleep so peacefully. Now, I want you to compare that highly connected experience to how so many babies are raised today in our modern world. They spend long hours completely alone in stationary cribs. They are strapped tightly into rigid car seats. They are pushed around in strollers where they cannot feel their mother's body heat, smell her scent, or feel her breathing. It is a very physically disconnected way to enter the world. Before we go any deeper into this scientific breakdown, let me pause and ask you a quick question. And I really want you to be totally honest in the comments down below. Have you ever felt judged, maybe by your friends, your family, or your neighbors for holding your baby too much or for carrying them in a non-traditional Western way, like on your back? Drop a comment down below right now, because I really want to see how many of us have faced that same exact cultural pressure and judgment just for doing what feels natural to us. Because here is the really crazy thing about all of this. People will constantly tell you that carrying your baby all the time is going to spoil them. Society tells us that if you hold them too much, it makes them overly clingy and dependent. But what if I told you that it seems like the exact opposite might actually be true? What if keeping them so close actually gives them the foundation to be much more independent later in life? Let's look at the second major reason I discovered, which I like to call the village child effect. In many African homes, both historically and today, babies are not typically raised around strict, rigid, by-the-clock schedules. Instead, they are raised around constant human presence. A baby in these cultures is rarely left alone in a dark, quiet room to just cry it out until they are exhausted. Instead, they are constantly passed from loving arms to loving arms, from aunties to grandmothers to older siblings to neighbors. There's this beautiful, continuous stream of eye contact, singing, gentle bouncing, and talking. But even when they are just strapped on the mother's back as she goes about her day, they are constantly experiencing community in a very profound way. Think about the visual perspective for a moment. A baby in a modern, expensive stroller is usually positioned low to the ground. They are looking at adult kneecaps or staring straight up at the sky, or maybe just looking at the fabric canopy of the pram. They are essentially, visually and physically isolated from the real, vibrant social interaction happening above them. But a baby on a mother's back, that baby is looking right over her shoulder. They are seeing the vibrant world exactly as she does. They are positioned all the way up at adult eye level. They are constantly learning about human connection, facial expressions, and social cues without their delicate senses ever getting overwhelmed, because they remain safely, securely anchored to their mother's familiar body. I truly think this might be one of the biggest reasons why so many of us immigrant mothers living in America, Canada, the UK, and all over the diaspora, why we sometimes feel so incredibly burnt out and exhausted. We are trying our hardest to do this hyper-individualistic style of modern parenting. We have one mother, often completely alone in a house all day long, trying to be the entire world, the entire village for her baby. And it is just so heavy. But in our traditional cultures, the baby doesn't just belong to the parent in isolation. In many African homes, a baby truly belongs to everyone. It is a communal joy, a communal responsibility. Yes, the baby is carried on the mother's back, but in a very real, emotional sense, the baby is also carried by the entire village. And you know what is incredibly ironic about all of this? Modern parenting experts and psychologists are suddenly selling expensive courses, writing best-selling books, and doing seminars about all these concepts. And they have coined all these fancy new terms for practices that have existed for centuries. Which brings us to the third and perhaps most fascinating point. And honestly, this is the one that gave me the immense sense of cultural pride when I was doing my research. We have almost always been told, whether directly or indirectly, that these traditional ways of parenting were somehow old-fashioned, unscientific, or even primitive, right? But what if modern science is actually just finally catching up to traditional African parenting? If you go online right now and look up the latest trends in early childhood development, the biggest buzzwords in the parenting space are things like attachment parenting, co-regulation, the fourth trimester, and skin-to-skin contact. Western parents are literally spending thousands of dollars on specialized baby-wearing wraps, ergonomic carriers, and soothing devices, all in a desperate attempt to recreate the womb environment to suit their babies. And I am just sitting here looking at all of this, thinking African mothers have been doing this exact same thing with a simple $2 piece of beautiful Ankara fabric for generations. But scientifically, here is what seems to be happening under the surface. Research suggests that when a baby is worn close to the body for extended periods, both the mother and the baby release a massive, steady amount of oxytocin into their bloodstreams. Oxytocin is commonly known as the love hormone. It is the chemical responsible for deep bonding, trust, and stress reduction. When a young baby feels overwhelmed by a loud noise or a strange environment, they simply do not have the brain development or the neurological maturity to calm themselves down. They cannot self-soothe in the way adults do. They desperately need to co-regulate with a calm adult. If they are lying alone in a separate room, their brain has to trigger a massive panic, a full-blown fight-or-flight response just to cry loud enough to get their mother to come to them. But an African baby securely tied to a back, they do not have to panic. They do not have to escalate their stress to a level 10 just to be heard, because they know instantly and instinctively that their mother is right there. Their fundamental human need for physical security is being fully met from day one. And psychological studies now seem to point out that babies whose emotional and physical needs are immediately and consistently met like this do not actually grow up to be clingy, dependent adults. It appears that they actually grow up to be highly independent, confident, and emotionally stable individuals because their foundational subconscious belief about the world is simply, I am safe and I am supported. Now, look, I want to be very clear here. I am not sitting here saying that African parenting is absolutely perfect or magically superior in every single way. We know that every culture has its beautiful strengths and every culture has its own weaknesses. We definitely have things we need to improve on too. And of course, every single baby is completely unique. What works perfectly for one child might not be the absolute solution for another. So this is not a one-size-fits-all magical cure. But when it comes to early childhood development and emotional security, it really seems like we have to admit that African back-carrying tradition is deeply, profoundly emotionally intelligent. African mothers, our wonderful grandmothers and great-grandmothers back in the village. They may not have used clinical psychological terminology like nervous system co-regulation or vestibular system stimulation, but they understood the core of it instinctively. They just naturally knew what a baby needed to feel secure in a big, scary world. So, I want you to remember back at the very beginning of this video when I asked what the big secret was, why some of our modern, hyper-independent parenting methods might actually be unintentionally contributing to the very crying and fussing we are so desperately trying to stop. Well, it seems like perhaps the answer is that modern society has gained incredible, unprecedented convenience, but in the process, we have somehow lost constant, grounding human connection. We bought the automated swings, the plastic walkers, the high-tech vibrating cribs, and the glowing tablets, hoping that all these gadgets would finally give us a much-needed break from the exhaustion of parenting. And instead, we might have accidentally created an environment of emotional isolation for our most vulnerable little ones. What if, and I really want you to take a moment and think deeply about this, what if calmness in a baby is not always just an inherent personality trait, but rather a direct biological result of physical proximity? What if many of the children today who are labeled as difficult or fussy are not actually difficult at all, but rather they are just feeling physically and emotionally disconnected from their primary source of safety? When my good friend Aminat out there in Ohio casually strapped her baby to her back while she cooked dinner, she wasn't just using an old, outdated village trick to silence a nuisance. She was, in a very real, scientifically backed way, wrapping her child in a biological blanket of absolute safety. Through the warmth of her skin, the rhythm of her steps, and the beat of her heart, she was quietly telling that baby's nervous system, "I am right here. You are safe. I've got you." Because maybe, just maybe, the greatest, most enduring gift that many African babies received from their culture was not having absolutely perfect parents, or having a lot of generational wealth, or having a room filled with the most expensive educational toys. Maybe the absolute greatest gift they received was this simple, profound, deeply rooted feeling that from the moment they entered this loud and chaotic world, they were never, ever alone. But establishing this beautiful, deep feeling of safety when they are babies is really only the very first chapter of this story. As they grow up, especially in the fast-paced modern diaspora, a completely new challenge emerges for us mothers. Right now, we are seeing a heartbreaking epidemic of deeply anxious, overwhelmed older children. And it leaves us constantly wondering, how do we protect them while also raising them to be strong, responsible individuals who will confidently carry our legacy and become our greatest pride? How do we take that securely attached, calm baby and actually raise them into a deeply resilient child who isn't paralyzed by the anxieties of today's culture? Well, there is a very specific traditional blueprint for this exact stage of childhood, and it completely shifts the psychological foundation of everything we think we know about parenting today. I'm going to be unpacking that entire blueprint in my very next video. And trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video today. If this topic resonated with you, if it sparked a thought, or if it brought back a fond, warm memory of your own mother, your grandmother, or your childhood, please do me a favor and hit that like button so this message can be shared by the algorithm and reach more mothers out there who might just be feeling a little overwhelmed and isolated today. And please do not forget to subscribe to the channel so we can continue these deep, meaningful dives into our rich culture, our traditional lifestyles, and our shared human experiences. I can't wait to read all your thoughts in the comments, and I will see you all in the next video. Stay blessed and take care.